a woman trapped in a loveless marriage, a husband who locked her inside. The shocking truth that changed everything. Welcome back to our channel. Before we dive into this incredible story of love, betrayal, and redemption, make sure you hit that like button and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Now, let's begin. The sound of the key turning in the lock echoed through the empty corridor like a death sentence. Lady Eliza Hawthorne pressed her palm against the heavy oak door of her bedchamber, her breath coming in short, angry bursts. On the other side, she could hear him, her husband, the Duke of Blackmore, standing in silence. "Adrian," she said, her voice trembling between fury and disbelief. "Open this door, now." Nothing. "I said open it!" Still nothing. Just the sound of his breathing, slow and deliberate, as if he were gathering courage he'd never possessed. "You cannot keep me prisoner in my own home," Eliza continued, her voice rising. "This is madness. Do you hear me? Madness." Finally, his voice came through the wood, low, rough, breaking at the edges. "I know." That was all he said. 2 words, and then footsteps retreating down the hall. Eliza stood frozen, her mind racing through the impossible reality of what had just happened. Her husband, the cold, distant, impeccably controlled Duke of Blackmore, had just locked her inside her own room like a prisoner in a tower. And the worst part? She had no idea why. 9 months earlier. The carriage that brought Eliza Hawthorne to Blackmore Keep rolled through gates that looked like they'd been designed to keep the world out, and anyone inside trapped forever. Everything about the estate screamed isolation. The stone walls rose sharp and gray against an endless sky. The hills stretched barren and wind-scarred in every direction. Even the trees seemed to lean away from the house, as if they'd tried to escape and failed. Eliza pressed her gloved hand against the cold window and watched the fortress grow larger with each turn of the wheels. "This is your life now," she told herself. "Make peace with it." She'd known from the beginning that marriage to Duke Adrian Blackmore wasn't about love, it was about survival, her family's survival. Her father's debts had grown so catastrophic that only a strategic alliance could save them from total ruin, and the Duke, for reasons Eliza still didn't fully understand, had agreed to the arrangement. She'd met him exactly twice before the wedding. The first time he'd been polite, formal, and utterly unreadable, tall and dark-haired, with features that would have been handsome if they hadn't been carved from ice. His gray eyes had swept over her once, assessing, calculating, and then dismissed her just as quickly. The second meeting had been worse. He'd asked her a single question. "Do you understand what this marriage entails?" "A partnership," Eliza had answered carefully. "An alliance between our families." "Good." He'd nodded. "Then we understand each other." That had been the extent of their courtship. Now, as the carriage lurched to a stop in front of Blackmore Keep's massive entrance, Eliza took a steadying breath and prepared to meet her future. The door opened. A footman in pristine livery helped her down. The wind immediately tore at her traveling cloak, bitter and relentless. And there, standing at the top of the stone steps like a king surveying a conquered territory, was Adrian Blackmore. He looked exactly as she remembered, cold, controlled, untouchable. His dark coat fit him perfectly, every line sharp and deliberate. His expression revealed nothing. "Lady Eliza," he said, his voice carrying easily over the wind. "Welcome to Blackmore Keep." She climbed the steps, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Your Grace." He offered his arm, a gesture that should have been warm but felt purely mechanical. She took it anyway. "I trust your journey was tolerable," he said as they walked through the entrance hall. "It was long." "The north is remote. You'll adjust." "Will I?" Eliza wanted to ask. But she kept the question locked behind her teeth. The interior of Blackmore Keep was as cold as its exterior. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, portraits of severe-looking ancestors glaring down from the walls. Every surface polished to perfection, yet somehow lifeless, like a museum no one visited. "Mrs. Davison will show you to your rooms," Adrian said, gesturing to the stern-faced housekeeper who'd appeared like a ghost. "We dine at 8. I'll have someone escort you down." "You won't show me the estate yourself?" Eliza asked before she could stop herself. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or annoyance. I have business to attend to. Mrs. Davison knows the house better than I do. And just like that, he turned and walked away, leaving Eliza standing in the cavernous entrance hall with a housekeeper who looked like she'd been carved from the same stone as the walls. "This way, my lady," Mrs. Davison said, her voice clipped and efficient. Eliza followed, her heart sinking with each step. Her chambers were beautiful in a cold, impersonal way. High ceilings, elegant furniture, a four-poster bed draped in heavy velvet, windows that overlooked the barren hills stretching endlessly toward the horizon. It felt like a gilded cage. "The Duke's chambers are in the east wing," Mrs. Davison explained, gesturing vaguely in the opposite direction. "You'll have privacy here." Privacy. The word felt like a polite euphemism for isolation. "Will I be dining with the Duke tonight?" Eliza asked. "I believe so, my lady, though His Grace often takes his meals in his study." "I see." Mrs. Davison's expression softened slightly, the first hint of humanity Eliza had seen in the woman. "You'll adjust, my lady. Blackmore Keep takes some getting used to, but it's not without its charms." Eliza wanted to ask what those charms might be, but the housekeeper had already turned to leave. Alone, Eliza walked to the window and stared out at the desolate landscape. The wind howled against the glass. The sky hung low and gray, threatening rain. "What have I done?" she thought. "What kind of life is this?" But she already knew the answer. This was the life she'd agreed to, a transaction, an arrangement, a marriage in name only. And she would have to find a way to survive it. The wedding took place 3 days later in the estate's private chapel, a small, drafty room that smelled of old stone and older prayers. There were no guests, no celebration, no music, just Eliza in an ivory gown that suddenly felt too fine for such a cold ceremony, and Adrian in black, looking like he was attending a funeral instead of a wedding. The vicar, a nervous, elderly man from the nearby village, rushed through the vows as if he couldn't wait to escape. Adrian's responses were flat and emotionless. Eliza's voice trembled despite her best efforts to steady it. When the vicar pronounced them man and wife, Adrian turned to her with the same expression he might have worn while reviewing estate ledgers. "You may kiss the bride," the vicar prompted hesitantly. Adrian leaned in, slowly, carefully, as if approaching a wild animal that might bolt. His lips brushed against Eliza's cheek, cold and quick. It was over in less than a second. "Congratulations, Your Grace," the vicar said to Adrian. Then, remembering Eliza existed. "And to you as well, Your Grace." Eliza nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. They signed the register in silence. Then Adrian escorted her back to the main house, his hand barely touching her elbow. "I've arranged for a small supper in the dining room," he said as they walked. "Nothing elaborate." "That's kind of you." "It's expected." They reached the entrance hall. Adrian stopped, turning to face her with that same unreadable expression. "I have business to attend to," he said. "I'll join you at 8. Before Eliza could respond, he was gone, vanishing into the maze of corridors like smoke. She stood alone in her wedding dress, in a house that felt like a tomb, married to a man who could barely look at her. And for the first time since arriving at Blackmore Keep, Eliza felt tears burn behind her eyes. But she refused to let them fall. She'd made this choice. She'd saved her family. She'd done what had to be done. Now she would live with the consequences. The first month of marriage passed like a slow torture. Adrian kept to his word about maintaining distance. He slept in the east wing, so far away that Eliza sometimes wondered if they even lived in the same house. Meals were taken separately more often than not. When they did dine together, conversation consisted of polite inquiries about the weather and estate matters. He never touched her, never smiled, never showed the slightest interest in her thoughts, her feelings, her existence beyond the bare minimum required by propriety. It was like being married to a ghost. Eliza tried, at first, to bridge the gap. She asked about his day, his interests, his childhood. But every attempt was met with the same courteous deflection. "It's kind of you to ask. Nothing worth discussing. I'm sure you have better things to occupy your time." Eventually, she stopped trying. Instead, she threw herself into the only thing that seemed to matter in this frozen wasteland, the estate itself. Blackmore Keep, for all its grandeur, was falling apart. Not in obvious ways, the Duke was too proud to let the facade crumble. But beneath the polished surfaces, everything was rotting. The tenant farms were struggling, roofs leaked, fields lay fallow. The people who worked the land looked tired and defeated, ground down by years of neglect. It didn't take Eliza long to understand why. Adrian Blackmore ran his estate the way he ran his marriage. With cold efficiency and zero emotional investment, he paid wages on time, kept the books balanced, and maintained order through sheer force of authority. But he didn't care. Not really. Not about the people whose lives depended on his land, and people could tell. Eliza started small. She visited the tenants, something the previous Duchess had apparently never done. She listened to their problems. She made notes. She began quietly redirecting household funds toward repairs that had been neglected for years. Mrs. Davison watched these efforts with obvious skepticism at first. His Grace won't approve of you interfering with estate management, the housekeeper warned. Then His Grace can tell me himself, Eliza replied calmly. But Adrian never said a word. He signed off on her expenditures without comment, approved her projects with barely a glance. It was as if he simply didn't care what she did, as long as she didn't bother him with it. The indifference stung worse than anger would have. Still, Eliza continued, she hired workers to repair the worst of the tenant cottages. She consulted with the head gardener about reviving the estate's abandoned gardens. She reorganized the household staff, giving them clearer responsibilities and better working conditions. Slowly, painfully slowly, Blackmore Keep began to come back to life. The servants started smiling when they saw her. The tenants began calling her Our Lady instead of Her Grace. The gardens, though still wild and overgrown, showed hints of color for the first time in years. But the one person Eliza couldn't reach was the man she'd married. Adrian remained as distant as ever, a shadow moving through the halls, present but never truly there. And every night, Eliza lay alone in her enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long a person could survive in a marriage that felt like slow suffocation. It was during a rare shared breakfast in late spring that everything changed. Eliza had been reviewing the week's household accounts when Adrian entered the dining room, unusually early for him. He looked tired, she noticed, dark circles under his eyes, his normally perfect appearance slightly rumpled. "Good morning," she said automatically. "Good morning." He poured himself coffee and sat at the opposite end of the long table. They ate in silence for several minutes. Then, unexpectedly, Adrian spoke. "I notice you've been spending considerable time with the tenants." Eliza set down her fork carefully. "Yes, the conditions were concerning, and you've taken it upon yourself to address those concerns." Someone needed to. She hadn't meant it as a criticism, but the words landed that way. Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The estate has operated successfully for generations without such personal intervention, he said coolly. Successfully? Eliza couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. The Miller family is living in a cottage with a roof that leaks so badly they have to sleep in shifts to avoid the drips. The Thatcher children are sick because their well water is contaminated. The South Fields haven't been properly rotated in 5 years. That's not success, Your Grace. That's neglect. Adrian's eyes flashed, the first real emotion she'd seen from him in weeks. You've been here less than 2 months. You cannot possibly understand the complexities. I understand that people are suffering while you hide in your study, Eliza shot back. The words hung between them like a thrown gauntlet. Adrian stood slowly, his movements controlled but radiating tension. You forget yourself, madam. No, Eliza said, standing as well. I think I'm finally remembering myself. I didn't come here to be a decoration, Your Grace. If this marriage means nothing else, at least let it mean I can do some good. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the ridiculous expanse of the dining table. Then Adrian's expression shuddered completely, back to that impenetrable mask. Do what you think necessary, he said flatly. I won't interfere. He walked out without another word, leaving his breakfast half-eaten. Eliza sank back into her chair, her hands shaking with adrenaline and something that felt dangerously close to hope. It wasn't much. It wasn't affection or warmth or anything resembling partnership. But it was the first real conversation they'd had, and Eliza would take whatever small victories she could find. Spring turned to summer and Blackmore Keep continued its slow transformation. Eliza worked from dawn until dusk, pouring every ounce of her energy into the estate. She commissioned repairs, organized community gatherings, even convinced the village doctor to visit the more remote tenant families regularly. The results were undeniable. Crop yields improved. Tenant morale lifted. The estate's reputation in the region began to shift from that cold bastard Blackmore's land to something resembling respect. And through it all, Adrian watched. Eliza didn't realize it at first, but Mrs. Davison mentioned it one afternoon while they were reviewing the household accounts. "His Grace approves, you know," the housekeeper said quietly. Eliza looked up in surprise. "He told you that?" "He doesn't have to. I've served this family for 20 years, my lady. I know when he's pleased." Mrs. Davison's stern features softened into something almost maternal. "He watches you work. From the study window, I've seen him standing there, looking out at the gardens you've restored." "Then why doesn't he say anything?" Eliza asked, hating how plaintive her voice sounded. Mrs. Davison sighed. "His Grace. He's not like other men, my lady. His father was a hard man, cruel, some would say, and his mother—" She trailed off as if she'd already said too much. "What about his mother?" "It's not my place to say, but the Duke learned early that showing affection was dangerous. The caring meant getting hurt." The housekeeper met Eliza's eyes directly. "You're the best thing that's happened to this estate in a generation. Don't give up on him yet." Eliza wanted to say that she wasn't giving up, that she'd never really started, that you couldn't give up on someone who'd never let you in. But she kept those thoughts to herself. The breaking point came on a warm July afternoon when Lord Julian Carroway arrived at Blackmore Keep. Eliza had been in the gardens supervising the planting of new rose bushes when she heard the sound of horses approaching. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, and watched as an elegant carriage rolled up the drive. A man emerged, tall, blonde, with an easy smile that seemed completely foreign to Blackmore Keep's grim atmosphere. "You must be the new Duchess," he said, sweeping into a theatrical bow. "Lord Julian Carroway at your service, old friend of your husband's, though he'd probably deny it." Despite herself, Eliza smiled. "Welcome to Blackmore Keep, Lord Carroway. Please call me Julian, and I must say the rumors don't do you justice." Rumors? That Blackmore had married a woman beautiful enough to thaw even his frozen heart. Julian's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Though I see the thawing is going better with the estate than with the man himself." Eliza flushed. "I don't know what you mean." "Of course not." Julian glanced at the garden. "May I?" He gestured to the path. They walked together, Julian keeping up a steady stream of charming conversation that Eliza found both refreshing and slightly overwhelming. He asked about her work on the estate, praised her efforts, and told amusing stories about Adrian's younger days. "He wasn't always so cold, you know," Julian said at one point. "There was a time when Adrian Blackmore was almost human." "What changed?" Eliza asked before she could stop herself. Julian's expression grew serious. "Love. Or rather, betrayal dressed up as love. But that's his story to tell, not mine." They rounded a corner and nearly collided with Adrian himself. He stood in the middle of the path, his expression carved from ice. His eyes moved from Eliza to Julian and back again, and something dark and dangerous flickered in their depths. "Carroway," he said flatly, "I wasn't expecting you." "Clearly," Julian replied, unperturbed. "I wrote 3 weeks ago. Perhaps the letter went astray." "Perhaps." Adrian's gaze settled on Eliza. "I need to speak with you, privately." It wasn't a request. "Of course," Eliza said. She turned to Julian. "Please excuse me, Lord Carroway." "The pleasure was all mine, Your Grace." Julian bowed again, that infuriating smile still in place. Adrian turned and walked toward the house without waiting to see if Eliza followed. She did, her heart pounding with a mixture of apprehension and something that felt almost like excitement. Because for the first time in months, Adrian Blackmore looked like he actually felt something, even if that something was anger. They reached his study, a room Eliza had never been invited into. Adrian held the door open, waiting for her to enter, then closed it firmly behind them. "What were you doing with Caraway?" he demanded. Eliza blinked. "Walking in the garden. He was being friendly." "Friendly?" Adrian's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Julian Caraway is never friendly without an agenda. He's your guest. I didn't invite him." "Nevertheless, he's here, and I was being courteous to a visitor, which is more than you seem capable of." Adrian's jaw clenched. "You don't know him." "And whose fault is that?" Eliza shot back. "You've kept me isolated here for months. You barely speak to me. You treat me like a piece of furniture you occasionally have to acknowledge. So forgive me if I appreciated a conversation with someone who actually seemed interested in what I have to say." "He's interested in more than your conversation." The accusation hung in the air. Eliza felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from shame, but from fury. "How dare you?" "I'm simply stating facts." "You're stating nothing. You know nothing about me, Your Grace. You've made no effort to know me. You married me and then abandoned me in this frozen prison of a house. And now you have the audacity to suggest—" She broke off, too angry to continue. Adrian stood rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. "I'm trying to protect you." "From what? Friendship? Basic human kindness? Or from yourself?" Something cracked in his expression. Just for a second, Eliza saw past the armor to the man beneath, and what she saw there shocked her. Pain, raw and deep and carefully buried. But before she could process it, the mask slammed back into place. "This conversation is over," Adrian said coldly. "Caraway will stay for dinner as a courtesy, then leave first thing in the morning. You will keep your distance from him." "You can't order me. I'm your husband. I can order whatever I damn well please." They stared at each other, both breathing hard. Then Eliza did something she'd never done before. She laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was sharp and broken and filled with months of accumulated grief. "My husband," she repeated. "Is that what you are? Because from where I'm standing, you're just a stranger who signed a piece of paper and then did everything possible to avoid the consequences." Adrian flinched, actually flinched, as if she'd struck him. Eliza pressed her advantage, knowing she should stop but unable to. "You want to know the truth, Your Grace? I wish Julian Caraway had arrived 6 months ago. I wish he'd been the one to save my family from ruin instead of you, because at least he knows how to smile. At least he treats me like a human being instead of an inconvenient obligation." The words were cruel, and she knew it, but God help her, they felt good. Adrian went completely still. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Get out. Adrian, get out." Eliza fled, her vision blurred with tears she'd been holding back for far too long. She didn't see Adrian for the rest of the day. Julian stayed for dinner, a horribly awkward affair where he tried valiantly to maintain conversation while Adrian sat in stone-faced silence and Eliza pushed food around her plate. The next morning, true to Adrian's command, Julian departed, but before he left, he found Eliza in the garden. "I've made things worse," he said quietly. "I'm sorry." "It's not your fault." "Isn't it?" Julian smiled sadly. "I pushed too hard. Flirted too obviously. I wanted to see if the ice would crack, and it did, just not the way I expected." "Why did you come here, really?" Eliza asked. Julian was quiet for a long moment. "Because Adrian wrote to me, months ago. Said he'd married and that the estate was improving under your care. He didn't say much else, but—" He met her eyes. "I've known him since we were boys, and I'd never heard that tone in his letters before. Like he was drowning and didn't know how to ask for help." Eliza's heart clenched. "He has a terrible way of showing it." "He does." Julian took her hand briefly. "But he's not beyond saving. Neither is this marriage. Don't give up yet, Your Grace." The same words Mrs. Davison had said. Don't give up yet. But Eliza was so tired of holding on to hope that led nowhere. The weeks that followed Julian's visit were worse than before. Adrian didn't just retreat. He vanished. Eliza saw him perhaps twice in a month, and both times were purely by accident. He took all his meals in his study. He rode out before dawn and returned after dark. The few times they passed in the hallways, he looked through her as if she didn't exist. It was somehow worse than the cold courtesy of before. Then In late August, disaster struck. A violent summer storm rolled in from the north, the kind that turned day to night and sent servants scrambling to secure shutters. Eliza had been checking on the tenant families, making sure everyone had what they needed, when the rain began. She'd made it back to the keep drenched and shivering, her clothes plastered to her skin. Mrs. Davison took one look at her and immediately ordered a hot bath and dry clothes. But by evening, Eliza was running a fever. By the next morning, she was delirious. The fever consumed her for 3 days. She drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of cool cloths on her forehead, voices murmuring nearby, the doctor's concerned face hovering above her. But through it all, one constant remained. Every time she surfaced toward consciousness, she heard breathing outside her door, steady, patient, unmoving. Someone was sitting in the hallway, keeping vigil. On the 4th day, the fever broke. Eliza woke to sunlight streaming through her windows and Mrs. Davison sitting beside her bed. "Welcome back, my lady," the housekeeper said with obvious relief. "How long?" Eliza's voice came out as a rasp. 3 days. You gave us quite a scare." Mrs. Davison helped her sit up, propping pillows behind her. Eliza's mind felt fuzzy, fragmented. "I thought I heard... Was someone outside my door?" Something shifted in Mrs. Davison's expression. "Drink this first." She handed Eliza a cup of broth. "Mrs. Davison, who was it?" The housekeeper sighed. "His Grace. He's been there every night since you fell ill. Refused to leave even when we begged him to rest." Eliza's hand shook, sloshing broth onto the blanket. "Adrian was... He stayed?" "All 3 nights. The doctor said there was nothing to be done but wait, and His Grace said he'd wait right there." Mrs. Davison's stern face softened. "I brought him blankets, food he didn't eat. He just sat there listening, like he was afraid if he left you'd slip away." "But he never came in?" "No, my lady. He stayed outside." Of course he did, Eliza thought bitterly. Even in crisis, Adrian Blackmore couldn't cross that final barrier. "Where is he now?" she asked. "Asleep in his chambers, finally." The man was dead on his feet. Eliza set down the broth, her mind racing. She should feel grateful, she supposed, touched that he'd cared enough to keep vigil, but instead she felt the old anger rising again. He'd sat outside her door for 3 days, but he couldn't bring himself to actually enter the room, couldn't bring himself to be present in the one moment when she might have actually needed him. It was care delivered from a distance. Love, if you could even call it that, locked safely behind closed doors. And suddenly, Eliza knew she couldn't do this anymore. She waited until she was strong enough to walk without assistance. Then she requested a meeting with Adrian in his study. He looked terrible when she entered, exhausted, unshaven, his clothes rumpled, but his eyes went wide when he saw her standing. "You should be resting," he said immediately. "I've rested enough." Eliza closed the door behind her. "We need to talk." Adrian gestured to a chair. "Sit, at least." "I'd rather stand." Something in her tone made him still. "Eliza, I'm leaving," she said simply. "After Christmas. I'll stay through the holidays so as not to cause scandal, but then I'm returning to my family." The color drained from Adrian's face. "You can't..." "I can, and I am." Eliza kept her voice steady despite the way her heart was hammering. "This isn't a marriage. It's a performance, and I won't spend the rest of my life pretending. Everything you've built here, the estate, will continue without me. You don't need me for that. You never did." Adrian stood, gripping the edge of his desk. "I forbid it." "You can forbid all you want. I'm done being a ghost in my own life." "Eliza, please." His voice cracked on her name. She'd never heard him sound like that before. Desperate, afraid. It almost made her stop. Almost. "I heard you were outside my door," she said quietly, "while I was ill. Mrs. Davison told me you stayed there for 3 days." Adrian's jaw clenched. "I wanted to ensure you were safe. But you never came in. The doctor said there was nothing to be done but wait. You could have come in. You could have sat with me, held my hand, been present." Eliza's voice broke despite her best efforts. "But you couldn't even do that, could you? Because being in the same room as me, actually sharing space with me, was too much to ask. You don't understand. Then make me understand, Eliza shouted. Tell me why you married me if you can't stand to be near me. Tell me why you sit outside doors instead of walking through them. Tell me what I did wrong. You did nothing wrong, Adrian shouted back, and the force of it seemed to shock them both. Silence fell. They stared at each other across the study, two people married yet completely strangers. Then what? Eliza whispered. What is it? Adrian turned away, his shoulders rigid. When he spoke, his voice was so low she almost didn't hear him. You should go back to your room, rest. It was the same retreat, the same closed door, and Eliza was done. I'll be gone by New Year's, she said quietly. She didn't wait for a response. She simply walked out, closing the door behind her with a soft click that felt like a final judgment. Adrian didn't try to stop her. He didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't even acknowledge her declaration beyond a stiff nod the next time they passed in the hallway. It was exactly what Eliza had expected, and it broke her heart anyway. The months between her announcement and Christmas crawled by in painful slow motion. Eliza continued her work on the estate, though now every project felt like a goodbye. She made arrangements with Mrs. Davison to ensure the improvements would continue. She wrote letters to the tenants, explaining that she'd be leaving but that the Duke would honor all the commitments she'd made. Adrian remained a ghost. But Eliza noticed things, small things. Her favorite flowers, white roses, began appearing in her room, though no one would admit to putting them there. The projects she'd started received sudden influxes of funding she hadn't requested. And once, very late at night, she thought she heard footsteps stop outside her door, linger for a long moment, then retreat. But none of it was enough. Words unspoken, walls still standing, a husband who couldn't or wouldn't cross the distance between them. On Christmas Eve, Eliza packed her trunks. The carriage would arrive on December 27th. 3 more days, and she'd be free. She didn't know whether to feel relieved or devastated. She was staring out her window at the snow-covered grounds when she heard it, the unmistakable sound of a key turning in her door's lock. From the outside. Eliza spun around, her heart pounding. She crossed to the door and tried the handle. Locked. Adrian, she called, pressing her ear to the wood. Nothing. She tried again, louder. Adrian, what are you doing? And then finally, his voice came through the door, rough, exhausted, trembling. I can't let you leave. Eliza's hand froze on the door handle, her breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her throat. What did you say? She whispered. I can't let you leave. Adrian's voice came through the wood again, stronger this time, but still edged with something raw and desperate. I won't. She rattled the handle harder, anger flaring hot and immediate. You've locked me in my own room? Yes. The simple admission, no apology, no justification, just brutal honesty, stunned her into momentary silence. Have you lost your mind? Eliza demanded, her voice rising. This is imprisonment. You can't just, I know what it is. Then unlock this door right now. No. Eliza stepped back from the door, her mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. Adrian Blackmore, the man who'd spent 9 months avoiding her, who couldn't even sit in the same room during her illness, had just locked her inside her chambers like a madman from a Gothic novel. She pressed her palms against the heavy oak, trying to steady herself. Adrian, please, this is insane. I know that too. His voice was closer now, as if he'd moved right up against the other side of the door. But I'm out of options. Out of options? You've had 9 months of options. 9 months to talk to me, to explain yourself, to... Her voice cracked. To be a husband instead of a stranger. I know. Stop saying you know. Eliza slammed her hand against the wood. If you know, then why? Why did you wait until now? Why did you wait until I'd already decided to leave? Silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of their breathing, hers rapid and furious, his slow and labored. Because I'm a coward, Adrian said finally. Because I thought distance would keep us both safe. Because I believed that if I never let you close enough to matter, then when you inevitably left, it wouldn't destroy me. Eliza's anger faltered, replaced by something more dangerous. Hope. Adrian, but I was wrong. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. You already matter. You've mattered since the first month. and losing you is going to destroy me anyway. She closed her eyes, her forehead pressed against the door. Then why lock me in? Why not just talk to me like a rational human being? Because you won't stay. The words came out broken. If I unlock this door right now, you'll pack your things and leave, and I'll lose my last chance to make you understand. Understand what? Why I can't be the husband you deserve. Why I failed you. Why loving you terrifies me more than anything else in this world. The admission hung in the air like smoke from a cannon blast. Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs. You... what? I love you. Adrian's voice was steady now, as if saying it out loud had broken some internal dam. I've loved you for months. Since you stood in the rain with the Miller children, helping them rescue their cat from that collapsed shed. Since you argued with me about crop rotation at breakfast. Since you transformed this dead estate into something that feels almost alive again. Tears burned in Eliza's eyes. You have a terrible way of showing it. I know. I learned from my father that love was a weapon people used to hurt each other. I watched him use my mother's devotion to control her, to break her down piece by piece until there was nothing left but a shell. She loved him desperately, and it killed her. Eliza's breath caught. Mrs. Davison's cryptic comments suddenly made horrifying sense. Adrian, and before you, there was someone else. Catherine. I was 22 and stupid enough to believe she loved me for myself and not the title. I gave her everything, my trust, my heart, my future, and she took it all to another man's bed while planning to steal half my fortune. I'm not her, Eliza said fiercely. I know you're not. That's what makes this so much worse. How can that possibly be worse? Because if you were like Catherine, it would be easy to keep you at arm's length, easy to protect myself. Adrian's voice turned ragged. But you're good and kind and brave. You care about people I couldn't even see. You've made this frozen wasteland into a home, and knowing that I'm going to fail you the way my father failed my mother, knowing I'll eventually turn into him, you're not him either. You don't know that. Neither do I. That's the terror of it, Eliza. What if I let you close and it destroys us both? What if I become the kind of husband who suffocates you with jealousy and control? What if... So your solution is to lock me in a room? Eliza cut in, her voice sharp. To prove you're not controlling by literally imprisoning me? The silence that followed was thick with realization. God, Adrian breathed. You're right. I've become exactly what I feared. Then unlock the door. I can't. Why not? Because if I do, you'll leave, and I can't survive that. Eliza leaned her back against the door and slid down to sit on the floor, her legs suddenly too weak to hold her. On the other side of the wood, she heard a similar sound. Adrian, she realized, had done the same thing. They sat separated by inches of oak and years of walls neither of them knew how to tear down. I don't know what you want from me, Eliza said quietly. You can't keep me here forever. I know. So what's the plan? You hold me hostage until I promise to stay? I don't have a plan. Adrian's laugh was bitter. I've spent 9 months planning how to keep distance between us. I have no idea how to close it. You could start with the truth, real truth, not fragments delivered through a locked door. Another long silence. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. I'm afraid if I let you see all of me, you'll understand why I'm not worth staying for. The raw vulnerability in those words cracked something in Eliza's chest. All this time, she'd thought Adrian's coldness was indifference or cruelty. She'd never considered it might be fear. I can't promise I'll stay, she said carefully. Not after everything, but I can promise to listen. If you can promise to actually talk to me. Through a locked door? For now. Eliza drew her knees up to her chest. Tell me about your mother, the real story, not hints and fragments. She heard him shift on the other side of the door. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of memories he'd been carrying alone for too long. Her name was Eleanor. She was beautiful and gentle and completely wrong for my father. He married her because she was from a good family, because it was expected, but he didn't love her. I don't think he was capable of love. And she loved him? Desperately, completely. It was her tragedy. Adrian paused. He used it against her constantly. If she questioned his decisions, he'd withdraw affection until she apologized. If she showed interest in anything outside the estate, he'd remind her that her duty was to him. He isolated her from friends, family, anything that might give her strength to stand against him. Eliza closed her eyes, imagining a woman trapped in this same fortress, slowly suffocating under the weight of one-sided devotion. By the time I was old enough to understand what was happening, she was a ghost, Adrian continued. She smiled when required, agreed with everything he said, never expressed an opinion of her own, and when she died, I was 16, the doctor said it was pneumonia. But I knew the truth. She'd simply stopped fighting to live. I'm so sorry. The day before she died, she called me to her room. She could barely speak, but she grabbed my hand and made me promise something. Adrian's voice went thick. She made me promise I'd never do to my wife what my father had done to her, that I'd never let love become a cage. Oh, Adrian, so I kept that promise the only way I knew how, by never letting myself love anyone at all. He laughed, a sound devoid of humor. And then you arrived. And every day you stayed, you broke down one more piece of the walls I'd built. Every smile you gave the servants, every tenant family you helped, every garden you brought back to life. You were everything my mother should have been allowed to be, strong and capable and free. Then why push me away? Because I watched you transform this estate and thought, what happens when I inevitably try to control that? When my father's blood wins out and I start demanding you stay close, stop helping people, focus only on me? Adrian's voice turned harsh. When Julian arrived and I felt that jealousy burn through me, when I wanted to forbid you from ever speaking to another man, I knew I was becoming him, and I couldn't let that happen. Eliza pressed her hand against the door, wishing she could reach through it. So you chose to become a different kind of prison guard instead. Yes. The admission was barely audible. I became the husband who locks doors from the outside. They sat in silence, the weight of everything unsaid settling around them like snow. Finally, Eliza spoke. You said you loved me. I do. God help us both, I do. And I've loved you since summer, she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Since you approved the funding for the school repairs without even asking why I needed it. Since I found out you'd been reading my estate reports and making notes in the margins, useful ones. Since I realized the man everyone called cold was actually just terrified. She heard his sharp intake of breath. But love isn't enough, Adrian. Not when it's locked behind fear and silence. Not when you can't trust yourself or me enough to actually try. I know. Stop knowing. Eliza surged to her feet, frustrated beyond measure. Stop acknowledging your failures and start fixing them. You want me to stay? Then prove you can be the husband you're terrified of becoming, or prove you can be something better. How? Unlock the door. Eliza. Unlock it right now. Not because I'm ordering you to, but because you trust that I won't immediately run. Because you believe I'm strong enough to make my own choices. Because keeping me prisoner makes you exactly what you fear most. The silence stretched so long Eliza thought he might have walked away. Then she heard it. The scrape of metal. The click of the lock disengaging. The door didn't open. Adrian didn't enter. But the barrier between them was gone. Eliza stared at the handle, her hand trembling as she reached for it. I've unlocked it, Adrian said quietly, but I'm not opening the door. That's your choice. You can leave right now. I won't stop you. Or you can open it and look at the man who spent 9 months failing you. Either way, the decision is yours. Eliza wrapped her fingers around the cold metal handle. 9 months of loneliness. 9 months of wondering what she'd done wrong. 9 months of loving a man who seemed determined to be unloved. She could walk away, should walk away. Any rational woman would. But Eliza had never claimed to be entirely rational. She opened the door. Adrian stood in the hallway and Eliza's breath caught at the sight of him. He looked wrecked, eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion, hair disheveled, jaw covered in days-old stubble. His cravat hung loose around his neck. His waistcoat was buttoned wrong. He looked human, vulnerable, real. I don't have a speech prepared, he said roughly. I don't have pretty words or promises I'm sure I can keep. All I have is the truth. I love you, I've failed you, and I'm terrified of doing both. Eliza stepped across the threshold, closing the distance between them to mere inches. Then we'll both be terrified together. You deserve better than a husband who locks doors. Probably. But I don't want better. I want you. The real you, not the perfect distant Duke you think you need to be. Adrian's hands flexed at his sides, as if he wanted to reach for her but didn't trust himself. I don't know how to do this, how to be close. Neither do I. We'll figure it out. Eliza took a breath and made her own terrifying leap. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. No more locked doors, no more silent suffering. When you're afraid, you tell me. When you're jealous or angry or feeling like you're becoming your father, you tell me. We face it together or we don't face it at all. And if I fail, if I slip back into old patterns, then I'll call you on it. I won't be your mother, Adrian. I won't suffer in silence while you withdraw. I'll fight you every step of the way. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the ice that had frozen his features for so long. You really would, wouldn't you? Count on it. You're extraordinary, you know that? Adrian's voice was soft, wondering. I've spent months trying not to see it, and you've been extraordinary anyway. So are you. Under all that fear and frost, you're the man who stayed outside my door for 3 days, who funded every project I suggested even when you pretended not to care, who reads my reports and makes helpful notes you think I don't notice. You notice that? I notice everything about you. I've had 9 months of nothing to do but watch the man I love try to disappear. Adrian finally moved, not to leave, but to lift his hand slowly, carefully, as if approaching something precious and fragile. His fingers brushed her cheek, and Eliza felt the tremor in them. I'm going to fail you again, he whispered. I'm going to say the wrong thing or retreat when I should advance. I'm going to be a terrible husband more often than a good one. Then I'll be a terrible wife who calls you out on it. We'll be terrible together. The laugh that escaped him was raw and real, and nothing like the cold formality he'd worn like armor. How can you possibly want this? Want me? Because underneath all the walls and wounds, I see who you really are, and that man is worth fighting for. Eliza covered his hand with hers, pressing it against her cheek. The question is, do you see it too? Adrian closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. I'm trying to. Then that's enough. For now, that's enough. They stood like that, connected by touch and truth, and 9 months of accumulated longing, neither quite willing to break the fragile moment. Finally, Adrian spoke. I should let you rest. You were packing when I... He stopped, his jaw clenching with obvious shame. When I locked you in. I wasn't packing to leave tonight. The carriage doesn't come until the 27th. Will you? Adrian swallowed hard. Will you still be on it? Eliza considered the question seriously. Everything had changed in the last hour, but also nothing had. Adrian had finally opened up, but that didn't erase 9 months of isolation. He'd unlocked the door, but the damage from locking it in the first place remained. I don't know, she admitted. Ask me again in the morning, when we've both had time to think clearly. Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. That's fair. Adrian? Eliza caught his hand as he started to pull away. Thank you for finally talking to me, for trusting me with the truth. I should have done it months ago. Yes, but you did it now. That counts for something. He looked at their joined hands as if he couldn't quite believe the contact was real. Would it be acceptable if I stayed? Not in your room, he added quickly, but in the hallway, like before. The request was so vulnerable, so achingly honest, that Eliza felt her resolve waver. You can't spend another night on the floor, Adrian. You look half dead already. I know, but I can't. He broke off, struggling. I can't go back to my wing and pretend this didn't happen. Pretend I'm still that cold bastard who can sleep alone knowing you're somewhere in this house thinking I don't care. Then don't sleep in the hallway. Eliza made the decision before she could second guess it. Sleep in the chair by the fire. In my room. Adrian's eyes went wide. Eliza, I can't. Not in my bed. Just in the room, where we can talk if we need to. Where you're not locked out and I'm not locked in. She held his gaze steadily. Unless that's too much too soon? It's not too much. It's... Adrian's voice went rough. It's more than I deserve. Probably, but I'm offering it anyway. He followed her into the room like a man in a dream, his movements careful and uncertain. Eliza gestured to the large wingback chair near the fireplace, the one she'd spent so many lonely nights curled up in, staring at the flames and wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake marrying him. Adrian sat slowly, looking entirely out of place in the delicate furniture. His long legs didn't quite fit. His broad shoulders overwhelmed the chair's frame. It should have been awkward. Instead, it felt right. Eliza moved to her vanity and began unpinning her hair, hyper-aware of Adrian watching her reflection in the mirror. The intimacy of the moment struck her suddenly. This was what marriage should have been from the beginning. Quiet, domestic moments, comfortable silence, trust. Tell me about Catherine, she said quietly, running her brush through her hair. Adrian tensed. Why? Because she's part of why you're afraid, and I'd rather hear the story from you than wonder about it. He was quiet for so long she thought he might refuse. Then, staring into the fire, he began to speak. I met her at a house party the summer after university. She was beautiful, charming, everything a young duke could want. We had a whirlwind courtship. She made me feel seen in a way I'd never experienced. My father had just died. I was drowning in estate responsibilities, and she seemed like a lifeline. You loved her. I thought I did. Now I'm not sure I knew what love was. Adrian's hands gripped the chair arms. She convinced me to give her access to estate funds for various charities she claimed to support. I was too besotted to question it. Then one of my father's old solicitors discovered she'd been siphoning money to her actual lover, a fortune hunter she'd been planning to run away with. What did you do? Confronted her. She laughed in my face, said I'd been absurdly easy to manipulate, that my title was the only interesting thing about me, and that she'd never loved me at all. Adrian's voice went flat, emotionless. Then she tried to claim she was carrying my child to secure a settlement. Eliza's hand stilled on her brush. Was she? No. That lie collapsed within a week. I paid her off anyway, just to make her disappear. He finally looked at Eliza. After that, I swore I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt me again. And for 8 years, I kept that promise. Until me. Until you. Adrian's expression softened. You never asked for anything. Never tried to charm or manipulate. You just showed up and started fixing things, making this dead estate breathe again. And I didn't know how to handle someone who genuinely cared without wanting something in return. Eliza set down her brush and turned to face him. I wanted something. What? You. Your time. Your attention. Your heart. She smiled sadly. Not your money or your title or your power. Just you. That's the part I couldn't believe, that anyone would want just me. Well, believe it, because I do. Adrian stood and crossed to her slowly, as if giving her time to retreat if she wanted. When she didn't, he reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture tender and hesitant. I will fail you, he said again. It's inevitable. And I'll fail you too. That's what being human means. Eliza caught his hand, holding it against her cheek. But if we're going to fail, let's at least fail together. Let's try. You make it sound simple. It's not, but it's better than the alternative. Adrian's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, his touch reverent. I meant what I said earlier. I love you. I've loved you for so long, it feels like drowning and breathing at the same time. I love you too. Even though you're infuriating and emotionally constipated and apparently prone to locking doors. The laugh that escaped him was genuine, warm, nothing like the cold formality she'd endured for months. Emotionally constipated? Extremely. It's a medical marvel you haven't imploded. I very nearly did tonight. Adrian's smile faded. When I heard you tell Mrs. Davison to prepare the trunks, something in me just broke. All the carefully constructed distance, all the walls I'd built, none of it mattered anymore. I couldn't let you leave without at least trying to make you understand. So you locked me in a room. Yes. And it was insane and wrong and exactly the kind of controlling behavior I swore I'd never exhibit. He dropped his hand, shame flooding his features. I'm sorry. I'm so desperately sorry. I know you are. Eliza caught his hand before he could fully retreat, and I'm choosing to see it for what it was. A desperate man making a terrible decision because he'd run out of good ones. But Adrian, if you ever lock a door on me again, I won't, I swear it. Good. Because next time I'll climb out the window just to prove a point. You would too. Absolutely. Eliza smiled. I'm not the wilting flower your mother was. If you try to cage me, I'll burn the cage down and you with it. Promise? The vulnerability in that single word broke her heart. He wasn't asking her to be gentle. He was asking her to be strong enough to fight him when he needed fighting. I promise, she said solemnly. I will never, ever let you become your father, even if it means fighting you every day for the rest of our lives. Adrian pulled her close suddenly, wrapping his arms around her as if she might disappear. Eliza felt him trembling and realized this was the first time they'd truly embraced since their wedding day, and that had been more performance than connection. This was real, raw, honest. Don't leave, he whispered into her hair. Please, give me a chance to do this right. Eliza buried her face in his chest, breathing in the scent of him, soap and smoke and something uniquely Adrian. I'll think about it. That's not a no. No, it's not. They stood like that until the fire burned low and exhaustion finally caught up with both of them. Adrian reluctantly released her and moved back to the chair while Eliza climbed into bed, still wearing her dressing gown. Good night, Eliza, Adrian said quietly. Good night, Adrian. She closed her eyes, hyper-aware of his presence in the room. The sound of his breathing, the crackle of the fire, the sense that something fundamental had shifted between them. But whether that shift was enough to save their broken marriage remained to be seen. Just before sleep claimed her, Eliza heard Adrian's voice, barely a whisper. Thank you for opening the door. She smiled into her pillow. Thank you for unlocking it. Morning light crept through the curtains like an unwelcome guest, dragging Eliza from sleep that had been far too brief. She opened her eyes to find Adrian exactly where she'd left him, sprawled in the chair by the fireplace, his head tilted at an angle that would leave his neck aching for days. He looked younger in sleep, vulnerable. The harsh lines of worry and control that usually defined his features had softened into something almost peaceful. Eliza watched him for a long moment, her mind churning through everything that had happened the night before. The locked door, the confession, the promises made through oak and desperation. She should still be furious with him, should pack her trunks and leave as planned. But watching him sleep in that chair, his long legs cramped, his body twisted uncomfortably because he'd chosen her presence over his own comfort, Eliza felt her resolve waver dangerously. You're staring, Adrian murmured, without opening his eyes. Eliza jumped slightly. How did you know? I can feel it. He finally opened his eyes, gray and clear despite the obvious exhaustion. It's like sunlight, warm but dangerous. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Probably. He sat up with a wince, rubbing his neck. But it's true anyway. They looked at each other across the room, and the air between them felt charged with possibility and uncertainty in equal measure. Have you decided? Adrian asked quietly. About the carriage? Eliza pulled the blanket closer around her shoulders. I told you I'd think about it. And have you? All night, while you were snoring. I don't snore. You absolutely do. It's like sleeping next to a bear. Adrian's lips twitched, almost a smile. I wasn't aware you'd had extensive experience sleeping next to bears. Just the one. Very grumpy, terrible furniture choices. The banter felt natural, easy, like something they should have been doing for months. But beneath it, tension hummed, the weight of decisions that needed making. Adrian, Eliza said, her voice turning serious. Last night you asked me to give you a chance, but I need to know what that actually means. What changes? He stood, crossing to the window where pale winter light filtered through frost-covered glass. Everything. Nothing. I don't know how to answer that because I don't know how to be what you need. Then we start with what you can be. Right now, today, what can you give me? Adrian turned to face her, his expression raw with honesty. Breakfast. Together. In the dining room, not separate wings. Conversation that isn't about estate ledgers. Transparency when I'm struggling instead of disappearing for days. He paused. And no more locked doors. That's a start. Is it enough? Eliza threw back the covers and stood, walking to where he stood by the window. For today? Yes. For tomorrow? We'll see. That's how this works, Adrian. One day at a time. One conversation at a time. One choice at a time. And if I fail, then we fight about it like normal married people instead of strangers. She reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. But you have to promise me something else. What? When the servants start talking, and they will, you don't retreat. When the tenants gossip about why Her Grace didn't leave after all, you stand beside me. And when people like Julian Caraway show up again, you trust me instead of locking me away. Adrian's jaw clenched. The jealousy won't just disappear. I'm not asking it to. I'm asking you to talk to me about it instead of letting it fester. Eliza squeezed his hand. Can you do that? I can try. Then that's enough. They stood together in the pale morning light, two people trying to navigate a marriage that had started broken and might yet be mended. I should dress, Eliza said finally. And you should probably do something about your appearance before the servants see you looking like you lost a fight with your chair. Adrian glanced down at his rumpled clothing and laughed, a real genuine sound that made Eliza's heart lift. I'll meet you in the dining room. Half an hour? Half an hour. He moved toward the door, then paused. Eliza? Yes? Thank you for not leaving last night, for opening the door. His voice went soft. For staying. I haven't decided to stay permanently yet, she reminded him gently. I know, but you stayed through the night. That's more than I deserved. After he left, Eliza dressed slowly, her mind racing through possibilities and consequences. The servants would know something had happened. Adrian's vigil outside her door during her illness had been noticed, and his presence in her room last night wouldn't go unremarked. The question was whether she cared. She was still contemplating this when her maid Sarah arrived to help with her hair. Good morning, Your Grace, Sarah said cheerfully, then froze when she saw the state of the chair by the fireplace, cushions askew, a blanket draped over one arm. Oh. His Grace spent the night here, Eliza said calmly. In the chair, we had much to discuss. Sarah's eyes went wide, but she recovered quickly. Of course, Your Grace. Shall I have fresh linens brought up? That won't be necessary. Eliza met the girl's eyes in the mirror. But Sarah, you should know, I may not be taking the carriage to London after all. The maid's face broke into a genuine smile. Oh, that's wonderful news. The whole household has been terribly worried about you leaving. Have they? Oh yes, Your Grace. Mrs. Davison says you're the best thing to happen to Blackmore Keep in decades, and Cook has been threatening to quit if you go, on account of His Grace being impossible to please when he's miserable. Eliza blinked in surprise. I had no idea. Begging your pardon, but you and His Grace haven't exactly been visible together. The staff talks, Your Grace. We notice things. I'm sure you do. Sarah finished pinning Eliza's hair and stepped back. For what it's worth, Your Grace, we're all rooting for you both. His Grace is a good man underneath all that frost. He just needs someone brave enough to weather the cold. The words stayed with Eliza as she made her way to the dining room. The household staff had been watching their broken marriage, hoping for something better. The weight of those expectations settled on her shoulders like a cloak. Adrian was already there when she arrived, looking significantly more composed in fresh clothing and with his hair properly combed. He stood when she entered, a gesture of courtesy he'd maintained even through the coldest months. You look beautiful, he said, and the naked honesty in his voice made her blush. You look less like you fought your furniture. I'll take that as a compliment. He pulled out her chair, another small gesture, but one that felt weighted with significance. They filled their plates in silence, the usual breakfast array spread before them. But when Adrian sat at his customary spot at the far end of the table, Eliza raised an eyebrow. That's a bit far for conversation, don't you think? He blinked, then seemed to realize the absurdity of sitting 10 feet away when they'd spent the night in the same room. You're right. He stood, gathering his plate and moving to the seat beside hers instead. It should have been a simple thing, but the intimacy of sitting close enough to touch, to speak without raising their voices, felt monumental. "This is strange," Adrian admitted. "Good strange or bad strange?" "Terrifying strange." Eliza laughed despite herself. "Well, at least you're honest about it." They ate in more comfortable silence, and Eliza was just beginning to relax when Mrs. Davison appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Your Grace, I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation." Adrian set down his fork immediately. "What kind of situation?" "The Ashford family, Your Grace. Little James. He's fallen through the ice on the North Pond. They've pulled him out, but he's in a bad way. The doctor's been sent for, but—" She trailed off, her meaning clear. Eliza was on her feet before Mrs. Davison finished speaking. "Where are they?" "Their cottage, Your Grace. But the doctor said—" "I don't care what the doctor said. Get my cloak." Adrian stood as well, his face set in grim lines. "I'll have the horses readied." "Your Grace, perhaps you should wait for the doctor's report," Mrs. Davison tried. "The child may already be—" "Then we'll be there for the family," Eliza cut in firmly. "Either way, they shouldn't be alone." 10 minutes later, Eliza and Adrian were riding hard toward the Ashford cottage, the winter wind cutting through their cloaks like knives. The sky hung low and threatening, promising more snow. "How old is James?" Adrian asked as they rode. 6, maybe 7. Eliza's voice was tight with worry. "He's the youngest. His mother was pregnant when I last visited, so there may be a new baby by now." "You know all the families." "Of course I do, don't you?" The question hung between them, an indictment and a revelation. Adrian had lived on this land his entire life, but had never known the people who worked it. Not really. They reached the Ashford cottage to find a small crowd gathered outside, neighbors drawn by tragedy, standing in helpless clusters. The moment Eliza dismounted, a woman broke from the group. "Your Grace, oh, thank heaven you've come." It was Margaret Ashford, James's mother, her face streaked with tears. "He's not breathing right, won't wake up proper. The doctor's not here yet, and I don't know what to do." "Show me," Eliza said, gripping the woman's hands. "Right now, show me." Inside the cramped cottage, James lay on a narrow bed, his lips tinged blue, his small body shivering violently despite the blankets piled on top of him. His father sat beside him, looking hollowed out with fear. Eliza knelt beside the bed, her mind racing through everything she'd ever learned about cold water drowning. How long was he under? "We don't know," Margaret sobbed. "He went out to check the rabbit snares, and when he didn't come back, Thomas found him in the pond. Could have been minutes, or—" "It doesn't matter now. We deal with what's in front of us." Eliza turned to Adrian, who'd followed her inside. "We need to warm him slowly, not too fast or we'll shock his system. And we need to keep his head elevated." Adrian nodded and immediately began issuing orders to the gathered neighbors. More blankets. Hot water bottles. Someone to ride and hurry the doctor. For the next hour, Eliza worked with single-minded focus. She monitored James's breathing, adjusted his position, spoke to him in low, steady tones, even though he couldn't respond. Adrian stayed at her side, following her instructions without question, his usual cold control channeled into useful action. When the doctor finally arrived, James's color had improved slightly, and his breathing had steadied. The elderly physician examined the boy thoroughly, then pulled Eliza aside. "You may have saved his life, Your Grace. The way you kept him positioned, warming him gradually. Whoever taught you that knew what they were doing." "My mother," Eliza said quietly. "She insisted I learn basic physicking, said a lady should know how to help in emergencies." "Well, it served the boy well today." The doctor glanced at James. "He's not out of danger yet. The next few days will tell, but he's got a better chance now than he did an hour ago." When they finally left the cottage, the crowd outside had grown. Every tenant family within riding distance had apparently heard the news and come to wait. They looked at Eliza with something approaching awe. "You saved him," someone whispered. "The doctor saved him," Eliza corrected. "I just kept him alive until help arrived." "You came," Margaret Ashford said, emerging from the cottage. "When our boy was dying, you came. Both of you." She looked at Adrian with tear-filled eyes. "I never thought—" "Forgive me, Your Grace, but I never thought you'd care." Adrian stood very still, and Eliza could see the words hitting him like physical blows. "Of course I care," he said stiffly. "You're my tenants." "We're your people," Eliza corrected gently, touching his arm. "There's a difference." The ride back to Blackmore Keep was silent, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Adrian's jaw was set, his eyes distant, and Eliza knew he was processing everything he'd witnessed. "I didn't know their names," he said finally, as the keep came into view. "I've collected their rents for years, approved repairs to their homes, and I didn't know that James existed. Now you do." "It's not enough. Knowing one name because tragedy forced me to notice. Then learn the others." Eliza reined in her horse, forcing Adrian to stop as well. "That's what change looks like. Not grand gestures or overnight transformations. Just showing up, caring, trying." Adrian met her eyes, and she saw something shift in their depths. "Teach me." "What?" "Teach me to see them the way you do. The families, the land, all of it." His voice was rough with emotion. "I've been a blind fool, and I don't want to be anymore." Eliza's heart clenched. "That's going to take time." "I have time. If you'll stay." There it was, the question he'd been circling all morning. And watching him in the Ashford cottage, seeing him follow her lead without ego or hesitation, Eliza realized something fundamental had shifted. "I'll stay," she said quietly. "Not forever, not yet. But I'll stay through winter. We'll see how we do." The relief that flooded Adrian's face was almost painful to witness. Through winter. One season at a time, remember? "One season at a time," he echoed. They rode the rest of the way in companionable silence, and when they reached the keep, Adrian surprised her by helping her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist longer than strictly necessary. "Thank you," he said softly, "for what you did today. For James, for his family, for showing me what I should have been seeing all along. Thank you for not being too proud to follow a woman's lead. I'd follow you anywhere, Eliza. That's becoming increasingly clear." The words hung between them, heavy with promise and possibility. But before either could say more, a commotion at the front entrance drew their attention. A rider was dismounting in obvious haste, his horse lathered with sweat. "Your Grace," the man called, catching sight of Adrian. "Urgent message from London." Adrian's expression shuddered immediately. "What is it?" The messenger handed over a sealed letter, and Eliza watched Adrian's face as he read. Color drained from his features. His hands began to shake. "Adrian?" she asked, alarmed. "What's wrong?" He looked up at her, and the devastation in his eyes made her breath catch. "It's Julian Caraway," he said hoarsely. "He's been spreading rumors in London. About you. About us." "What kind of rumors?" Adrian's jaw clenched so hard she feared his teeth would crack. "That our marriage is a sham. That you've been having an affair with him. That I keep you imprisoned at Blackmore Keep against your will." He crushed the letter in his fist. "He's destroyed your reputation, Eliza, and mine along with it." The world tilted sideways. "Why would he do that?" "Because I have something he wants. This estate, the title. His family lost everything in bad investments years ago. He's been angling for a way back into society and apparently decided that ruining us would serve his purposes." Eliza felt sick. "But it's all lies. The truth doesn't matter in London society. Once a rumor takes root." Adrian broke off, looking at her with anguish. "God, Eliza, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. If I'd been a better husband from the start, if people had seen us happy together, he never could have made these accusations stick." "We fight it," Eliza said firmly, even as her mind reeled. "We go to London and we fight it. Going to London will only make it worse. They'll tear you apart. Then what do you suggest? We hide here and let him destroy everything we've built?" Adrian paced away from her, his movements sharp with barely controlled rage. "I suggest I go to London alone and challenge him to a duel." "Absolutely not. He's impugned your honor, Eliza, your virtue. I won't stand for it. And getting yourself killed will fix that, how exactly?" Eliza grabbed his arm, forcing him to face her. "We're stronger together. We go together. We face this together. You don't understand what London society is like. They'll crucify you for sport. Then let them try. Eliza's voice rose with passion. I've survived 9 months in this fortress. I've weathered your coldness and won over your household and brought dying children back from the edge. I can handle a bunch of bored aristocrats with nothing better to do than gossip. Adrian stared at her as if seeing something entirely new. You're serious? Deadly serious? We leave tomorrow. We go to London, we show them a united front, and we make Julian Caraway regret ever speaking our names. It could backfire. We could make everything worse. Or we could make it better. But we'll never know if we hide. Adrian pulled her close suddenly, his arms wrapping around her with desperate strength. I don't deserve you. I don't deserve any of this. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. Eliza pulled back enough to meet his eyes. So what do you say? Are we doing this? We're doing this. Adrian's expression hardened into something fierce and determined. But if we're going to war, we do it properly. No more pretending we're strangers, no more separate wings and polite distance. What are you suggesting? That we go to London as what we should have been from the beginning, husband and wife, partners, a team. He cupped her face in his hands. I want to court you, Eliza, properly, the way I should have 9 months ago. Her breath caught. In the middle of a scandal? Especially in the middle of a scandal. Let them see that Julian's lies are exactly that, lies. Let them see that I adore my wife. You adore me? The words came out breathless. Desperately. Completely. Even though I've done a terrible job of showing it. Adrian's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. So yes, we'll fight this scandal together, but we'll also dance together at every ball, walk together in every park, and show London that the Duke and Duchess of Blackmore are absolutely, undeniably in love. Are we? Eliza whispered. Undeniably? I am. The question is whether you can be. Whether I've damaged this marriage beyond repair. Eliza looked at the man holding her, the man who'd spent 9 months running from his feelings and one night finally fighting for them. The man who'd helped save a tenant child this morning and was ready to face down society tonight. I think, she said slowly, that we might be, if we're brave enough to try. Then let's be brave. He kissed her then, not the cold brush of lips from their wedding day, but something real and desperate and full of 9 months of accumulated longing. Eliza melted into it, her hands fisting in his coat, her heart pounding against her ribs. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Tomorrow we leave for London, he said. Tonight we prepare for war. Together? Together. They walked into Blackmore Keep hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. But neither of them could have anticipated just how brutal the war would be. Because Julian Caraway hadn't just spread rumors. He'd set a trap, and they were walking straight into it. The letter that arrived that evening, delivered by a second messenger, made that brutally clear. Eliza read it 3 times before her hand stopped shaking enough to pass it to Adrian. It was from her father. My dearest Eliza, I write with the heaviest of hearts to inform you that Lord Caraway has called upon me with documents he claims prove financial mismanagement of your dowry by the Duke. He threatens legal action unless I publicly denounce the marriage and demand your return to your family. He has also made it known that he will testify in court, if necessary, that he witnessed the Duke's cruel treatment of you firsthand. Several other members of society have apparently corroborated his accounts. I know not what to believe, my child. Please, come home where you are safe. Let us sort this madness out together. Your loving father Adrian's face had gone white. He's attacking from every angle. Your reputation, my finances, your father's trust in me. His hands crumpled the letter. This isn't just scandal, it's orchestrated destruction. How could he have documents about the dowry? He couldn't, unless... Adrian's eyes went wide. Catherine, she still has contacts in London. If she gave him information about my finances, helped him forge documents, then we're not just fighting Julian, we're fighting both of them. The room felt suddenly smaller, the walls pressing in. Eliza's mind raced through options, each one darker than the last. Her father believed the lies. Society believed the lies. And now there was supposedly evidence to support them. Maybe I should go back to my family, she said quietly. If your reputation is destroyed because of me. No. Adrian's voice was steel. We don't surrender. We don't retreat. We fight. How? If they have forged documents, if society believes Julian's version, then we give them the truth. All of it. Adrian turned to face her fully. I go to London and I tell everyone exactly what happened. The real story of our marriage. My coldness, your strength, the transformation of this estate, the work you've done. And I make it very clear that Julian Caraway is a liar and a fortune hunter. That could backfire spectacularly. Probably. But it's the only weapon we have. Honesty. Adrian took her hands. But I need you to make a choice. Because this gets ugly, Eliza. They'll dig into every moment of our marriage, every argument, every night spent apart, every perceived slight. They'll try to prove Julian right. I know. And they'll come after you, your character, your actions, everything. His grip tightened. I'm asking you to walk into hell beside me. And I'll understand if you can't. Eliza looked at their joined hands, then up at the man who'd locked her in a room just yesterday out of desperate fear of losing her. The man who'd sat outside her door for 3 nights. The man who'd helped save a child this morning. The man she'd chosen, for better or worse. We go together, she said firmly. We tell the truth together, and we burn Julian Caraway's lies to ashes. Adrian pulled her close, and Eliza felt him shaking, not with fear, but with something fiercer. Determination, purpose. Then we leave at dawn, he said against her hair. And we show London what happens when you try to destroy a Blackmore. But neither of them saw the third letter that arrived that night. The one Mrs. Davison intercepted and hid in her apron pocket with trembling hands. The one that revealed Julian Caraway's final, devastating move. He'd convinced the Crown that Adrian had been embezzling estate funds meant for tenant improvements, and there was a warrant for the Duke's arrest waiting in London. Mrs. Davison stood in the shadows of the servants' hallway, the third letter burning a hole in her apron pocket. Through the door, she could hear their graces planning their departure to London, their voices tight with determination and fear. She'd served this family for 20 years, watched the old Duke break his gentle wife piece by piece, watched young Adrian build walls so high no one could reach him. And now, finally, when he'd found someone brave enough to scale those walls, the world was trying to tear them apart. The housekeeper pulled out the letter again, reading the official seal with trembling hands. A warrant for His Grace's arrest, embezzlement charges, evidence that couldn't possibly be real but looked damning enough on paper. If Adrian rode into London tomorrow, he'd be arrested the moment he arrived. Mrs. Davison made a decision. She smoothed her apron, squared her shoulders, and knocked firmly on the study door. "Enter," Adrian called. She walked in to find them both standing by the desk, surrounded by papers and ledgers, preparing their defense, gathering evidence of the estate's legitimate expenses. They looked up in surprise at her interruption. "Mrs. Davison?" Eliza said. "Is something wrong?" "Yes, Your Grace. Very wrong." The housekeeper held out the letter with a steady hand despite her racing heart. "This arrived an hour ago. I debated whether to show you, but you deserve to know what you're walking into." Adrian took the letter, his face paling as he read. When he finished, he handed it wordlessly to Eliza. "A warrant?" Eliza's voice was barely above a whisper. "For embezzlement?" "Julian's endgame," Adrian said flatly. "He's not just destroying our reputation, he's trying to put me in prison. But the charges are false, based on forged documents, I'm sure, but by the time we prove that, the damage will be done. My arrest alone will confirm every rumor he's spread." Mrs. Davison cleared her throat. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but there might be another way." Both of them turned to her sharply. "What way?" Adrian demanded. "Don't go to London. Let them come here." Eliza frowned. "I don't understand." "Lord Caraway wants you in London because that's his territory. He has allies there, connections, people willing to testify to lies. But here?" Mrs. Davison gestured around them. "Here, you have the truth. The estate ledgers, the tenant families who've benefited from your improvements, physical evidence of every penny spent exactly as it was meant to be spent." Adrian shook his head. You're suggesting we make them come to Blackmore Keep? The Crown doesn't negotiate locations for arrests. No, but they do send investigators when new evidence comes to light. Mrs. Davison pulled herself up to her full height. And what if evidence came to light suggesting Lord Carraway himself has been embezzling? Not from this estate, but from others? What if someone happened to have documentation of his real financial situation? Do you have such documentation? Eliza asked carefully. I might know where to find it. My sister works in London, keeps house for a solicitor. Very discreet man, handles matters for families who've been disadvantaged by certain fortune hunters. The housekeeper's eyes glinted. Lord Carraway isn't the first desperate nobleman to try this game. He's just the most ambitious. Adrian stared at her. You're suggesting we investigate him while he investigates us? I'm suggesting you stop playing defense and start playing offense, Your Grace. You have something Lord Carraway doesn't, the truth, and witnesses who'll testify to it. Eliza's mind was racing. The tenants. If we could get statements from the families, proof that the money went exactly where it was supposed to go. More than that, Mrs. Davison interrupted. The builders, the craftsmen, the suppliers, everyone who's been paid from estate funds in the last 9 months, they all have receipts, they all have records, and not a single one of them will have been paid by someone embezzling. But gathering all that evidence, coordinating testimony, that takes time we don't have, Adrian protested. The warrant is already issued. Then we buy time. Mrs. Davison straightened. I'll send word to London tonight. My sister will reach out to that solicitor, start pulling together information on Lord Carraway's actual financial dealings. Meanwhile, you two gather every scrap of evidence from the estate. When the authorities come, and they will come, you present them with a case so airtight they have no choice but to investigate Julian instead. That's an enormous gamble, Adrian said quietly. So is riding into London to be arrested? The housekeeper's voice gentled. Your Grace, I watched your father rule this estate through fear and control. I watched it nearly destroy you. Don't let Julian Carraway finish what he started. Fight him, but fight him smart. Eliza reached for Adrian's hand. She's right. We can't beat Julian on his ground. But here, with evidence and witnesses and the truth on our side, we might have a chance, Adrian finished. He looked at Mrs. Davison with something approaching wonder. Why are you helping us? This could backfire spectacularly. You could lose your position. Because Her Grace saved little James Ashford this morning when she didn't have to. Because you both rode out in a storm instead of sending servants. Because for the first time in 20 years, this house feels like a home instead of a tomb. Mrs. Davison's stern features softened. And because everyone deserves someone in their corner when the world tries to tear them down. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We have work to do. The housekeeper turned brisk and efficient. I'll send the letter to London tonight. You two start organizing the estate records. And Your Grace? She looked at Adrian. When those investigators arrive, you look them in the eye and you tell them the truth about your marriage. All of it. The good and the ugly. Make them see what I see. 2 people fighting like hell to build something real. After she left, Adrian sank into his chair, looking dazed. Did our housekeeper just orchestrate a counter-investigation? I believe she did. Eliza moved behind him, resting her hands on his shoulders. What do you think? I think she's brilliant and terrifying and possibly our only hope. He covered one of her hands with his. But Eliza, if we do this, if we stay and fight here, we're trusting that the evidence will be enough, that truth actually matters. Do you have a better idea? No, but I need you to understand the risk. If we're wrong, if they arrest me anyway, you'll be trapped here. Associated with a criminal, your reputation destroyed beyond repair. Eliza came around to face him, kneeling so they were eye level. Then we'd better make sure we're not wrong. Get up. We have ledgers to organize and witnesses to prepare. Just like that? No debate about the risks? Adrian, we're already in the middle of the fire. We might as well burn the whole thing down if we're going to burn at all. She smiled grimly. Besides, I didn't survive 9 months of your emotional constipation just to let Julian Carraway win. Despite everything, Adrian laughed. Emotional constipation. You really need to work on your romantic speeches. I'll add it to the list right after save husband from prison and destroy lying fortune hunter. They worked through the night, spreading ledgers and receipts across the study floor in organized chaos. Every expense Eliza had authorized, every improvement to the estate, every penny spent, documented, cross-referenced, verified. As dawn broke, Sarah brought them coffee and looked around at the paper-covered floor with wide eyes. "Begging your pardon, your graces, but what's all this?" "Evidence," Eliza said simply. "Sarah, I need you to do something for me. Go to every tenant family and ask them to write down, or dictate if they can't write, exactly what improvements have been made to their homes or lands in the past 9 months, who did the work, when it happened, how it changed their lives." "All of them, your grace?" "Every single one." "And Sarah? Tell them this is important. Tell them we're fighting for Blackmore Keep." The girl's eyes lit with understanding. "They'll do it, your grace. Everyone loves what you've done here. They'll fight for you." As Sarah hurried off, Adrian looked at Eliza with something approaching awe. "You really believe they'll help?" "I know they will. I've earned their trust. Now we're going to use it." Over the next 3 days, Blackmore Keep transformed into a war room. Tenant families arrived with their statements, some written in careful script, others dictated to the village schoolteacher. The local craftsmen brought their receipts and work orders. The suppliers provided invoices showing every transaction. The evidence mounted like a fortress wall, but it was the statements from the families that hit hardest. Margaret Ashford's testimony about how the repairs to their cottage had saved her newborn daughter from freezing. Thomas Brennan's account of the well that finally gave his family clean water. Mary Fletcher's description of the school repairs that meant her children could learn without shivering through winter. Story after story of lives changed, families helped, hope restored. "Listen to this one," Eliza said on the third evening, reading from a statement. "From old William Thatcher. Her Grace came to my cottage when I was too proud to ask for help. She saw the roof was failing and had it fixed without me having to beg. She treated me like I mattered. That's not something you forget." Adrian's throat worked visibly. "I never knew, all these years, and I never knew they were struggling like this. But now you do. And now we have proof that every penny went exactly where it was supposed to go, to people who desperately needed it." A knock at the study door interrupted them. Mrs. Davison entered, holding a sealed letter with obvious satisfaction. "From my sister in London, your graces. The solicitor has been very busy." Adrian broke the seal and read, his expression shifting from cautious hope to grim satisfaction. "Julian Caraway has debts across London. Gambling debts mainly, but also loans he took out using falsified credentials. He's been living on borrowed money and borrowed time for years." "The solicitor has witnesses willing to testify?" Eliza asked. "6 of them. Creditors Julian tried to cheat, associates he betrayed, and—" Adrian's eyes widened. "Catherine, his partner in this scheme. She's apparently ready to turn on him to save herself. Can we trust her testimony? She has documentation, letters between her and Julian planning this whole scheme. She kept them as insurance in case he tried to cut her out of the profits." Adrian set down the letter. "It's not just evidence anymore, Eliza. It's a full counter case. We can prove Julian orchestrated this entire scandal to try to seize the estate." "Then we're ready." "Not quite." Mrs. Davison pulled out another letter. "This arrived this morning. Investigators from the Crown will be here tomorrow to execute the warrant and examine the books." The momentary elation evaporated. Tomorrow. They had until tomorrow to prepare a defense strong enough to stop an arrest. "Then we work through the night again," Eliza said firmly. "We organize every piece of evidence so it's impossible to ignore. We prepare our witnesses, and we show these investigators exactly what Julian Caraway really is." Adrian stood, pulling Eliza up with him. "Mrs. Davison, send word to the tenant families. Ask them to gather at the keep tomorrow morning. All of them." "Your Grace, that's highly irregular." "So is everything else we're doing. If the Crown wants to arrest me for helping my people, then my people should be there to speak for themselves." The housekeeper smiled, rare and genuine. "I'll send word immediately." That night, neither Adrian nor Eliza slept. They worked side by side, organizing evidence into an undeniable narrative, every expense justified, every improvement documented, every family helped accounted for. As dawn approached, Adrian set down the final ledger and looked at Eliza across the paper-strewn desk. Whatever happens today, I need you to know something. Adrian, please let me say this. He came around the desk, taking her hands. 9 months ago, I married you as a transaction, a duty. I was so determined to keep you at arm's length that I nearly destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. And you fought back. You refused to be ignored or dismissed. You made this frozen estate bloom again, and somehow you made me remember what it feels like to be human. Eliza's eyes burned with unshed tears. We made each other human. If they arrest me today, they won't. But if they do, I need you to know that these last few days, fighting beside you, watching you rally an entire community to our defense, it's been the greatest privilege of my life. His voice roughened. I love you, Eliza Blackmore, not because you saved me, but because you refused to let me hide from what we could be together. I love you too, she whispered, and I'm not losing you, not to Julian, not to the crown, not to anyone. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, and full of promises they might not get to keep. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. Together, Adrian murmured. Together, Eliza echoed. The sound of carriages approaching sent them to the windows. 3 official coaches bearing the crown's seal rolled up the drive, flanked by guards. It was time. But as Adrian and Eliza descended the main stairs to face the investigators, they found they weren't alone. The entrance hall was packed with people, every tenant family, every estate worker, every person who'd benefited from Eliza's work stood in silent solidarity. Margaret Ashford held little James, recovered now and bright-eyed. William Thatcher stood tall despite his age, the craftsmen who'd done the repairs, the suppliers who'd provided materials, all of them, bearing witness. The lead investigator, a stern-faced man named Lord Pemberton, stopped short at the sight of the crowd. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. Adrian stepped forward, Eliza at his side. My lord, you've come to investigate charges of embezzlement. These are the people who can tell you exactly where every penny went. Highly irregular, Pemberton sputtered. I'll need to see the books. Interview you privately. The books are ready for your inspection, Eliza cut in calmly. Every ledger, every receipt, every invoice. But first, you should hear from the people Lord Carraway claims we've stolen from. I don't take orders from— These people are witnesses, my lord, Mrs. Davison interrupted, stepping forward with surprising authority. Surely the Crown's investigation includes speaking to witnesses. Pemberton's jaw clenched, but he nodded curtly. Very well. But I warn you, if this is some attempt to obstruct— It's an attempt to reveal the truth, Adrian said firmly. Something Lord Carraway has been working very hard to obscure. One by one, the tenant families stepped forward to give their testimony. They spoke of leaking roofs repaired, contaminated wells replaced, crumbling walls rebuilt. They showed the investigators receipts, work orders, before and after descriptions of their homes. Margaret Ashford's voice rang clear as she described how the cottage repairs had saved her daughter's life. William Thatcher, gruff and proud, admitted he'd been too stubborn to ask for help, until Her Grace had seen his need and met it with quiet dignity. Each testimony built on the last, creating an undeniable picture. Every expense had been legitimate, necessary, and carefully documented. Not a penny had been embezzled. Every single coin had gone exactly where it should, to people in desperate need. Lord Pemberton's stern expression gradually shifted to something more thoughtful. He examined the ledgers Adrian provided, cross-referenced them against the testimony, checked receipts against work completed. Finally, after 3 hours of intensive investigation, he set down the final ledger and looked at Adrian with grudging respect. Your Grace, based on what I've seen today, these embezzlement charges appear to be entirely without merit. Relief crashed over Eliza like a wave, but Adrian's expression remained controlled. What about the warrant? Will be withdrawn immediately, and I believe we need to have a very serious conversation about Lord Julian Carraway's motivations for bringing these charges. Pemberton glanced at his fellow investigators. This level of fabrication suggests a conspiracy. Do you have evidence of such? Extensive evidence, my lord. Adrian gestured to Mrs. Davison, who produced the folder of documents from the London solicitor. including testimony from Lord Carraway's co-conspirator, one Catherine Ashworth, detailing the entire scheme. Pemberton's eyebrows rose as he read. With each page, his expression grew darker. "This is substantial," he said finally. "Lord Carraway forged documents, bribed witnesses, and manufactured charges to try to seize your estate, while simultaneously spreading rumors designed to destroy my wife's reputation and force her to leave me," Adrian added, "making the estate vulnerable to claims of abandonment." Diabolical. Pemberton looked at Eliza with something approaching apology. "Your Grace, I must ask, are the rumors about your marriage true? The claims of cruel treatment?" Eliza felt every eye in the room turn to her. This was the moment. Truth or comfortable lies? She glanced at Adrian, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "The truth is complicated, my lord," she said clearly. "His Grace was not cruel, but he was distant, cold. We spent 9 months in a marriage that was more fortress than partnership, but we were never prisoners to each other, only to our own fears and mistakes. And now," Pemberton pressed, "now we're fighting to build something real, together." Eliza took Adrian's hand. "Lord Carraway witnessed the worst of our early marriage and twisted it into something monstrous. But what he didn't see was how we've changed, how we've grown, how we've learned to trust each other." Margaret Ashford stepped forward again. "If I may speak, my lord, I've seen their graces together this past week. I've watched them work side by side to save my son, to prepare this defense, to protect this estate. Whatever they were before, what they are now is clear as day. They're partners, and they're good people who care about those under their protection." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Pemberton studied them both for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I see. Well, your graces, based on the evidence presented, I'm recommending to the Crown that all charges against you be dropped immediately, and that Lord Carraway be investigated for fraud, conspiracy, and perjury." Adrian's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you, my lord." "Don't thank me yet. You'll need to testify formally in London, both of you. And I warn you, Lord Carraway still has allies in society. This won't be easy." "Nothing worth fighting for ever is," Eliza said quietly. Pemberton actually smiled at that. "Quite right, your grace. Quite right." He gathered his documents and stood. "I'll be in touch regarding the London proceedings. In the meantime, I suggest you prepare your case thoroughly. Lord Carraway won't go down without a fight." "Neither will we," Adrian said firmly. After the investigators left, the tenant families erupted into cheers. People crowded around Adrian and Eliza, offering congratulations and support, their voices rising in a cacophony of relief and joy. Mrs. Davison appeared at Eliza's elbow, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Well done, your grace." "We couldn't have done it without you." Eliza pulled the housekeeper into an impulsive hug. "Thank you for everything." "Just doing my duty, your grace." "No, you went far beyond duty. You gave us a fighting chance when we had none." As the celebration continued around them, Adrian pulled Eliza aside into a quiet corner of the hall. "We won," he said, as if he couldn't quite believe it. "We won the first battle. Julian's still out there, still dangerous. But we have the truth on our side now, and witnesses, and each other." Adrian cupped her face in his hands. "I meant what I said earlier. Every word." "So did I. Then when this is over, when we've finished destroying Julian and cleared our names completely, I want to start over, properly." His eyes held hers intently. "I want to court you the way I should have from the beginning. Take you to balls and theaters, walk with you in gardens, learn everything I should have learned in the first 9 months." "You want to date your own wife?" Eliza couldn't help but smile. "Desperately. Is that strange?" "Completely, but I like it." She reached up to cover his hands with hers. "On one condition." "Anything. No more locked doors, ever. No matter how scared you get or how badly you want to protect me from the world. We face everything together, or not at all." "Deal." Adrian kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips, soft and sweet and full of promises they'd both keep this time. Together. The word had become their talisman, their vow, their future. But even as they celebrated their first victory, neither of them saw the final letter that arrived that evening, delivered by a rider who'd pushed his horse to the breaking point. Julian Caraway had learned of the investigation's outcome, and he was coming to Blackmore Keep, not to surrender, to finish what he'd started. The letter arrived just as the last of the tenant families were departing, their voices still raised in celebration. Mrs. Davison brought it directly to Adrian, her face pale in the lamplight. "Your Grace, this just came. The writer said it was urgent." Adrian broke the seal, his expression darkening with each line he read. When he finished, he handed it silently to Eliza. "Blackmore, I hear congratulations are in order. The investigators found your little performance quite convincing. How touching that your tenants rallied to your defense. How noble that you've documented every penny spent on their pathetic hovels, but you've made a critical error. You think this is over. You think Catherine's betrayal and your wife's theatrics have won the day. They haven't. I'm coming to Blackmore Keep, tonight, and I'm bringing friends, men who don't particularly care about evidence or investigations. Men who understand that sometimes justice needs a more direct approach. Your estate should have been mine. Your title should have been mine. Everything you have was built on advantages of birth, not merit. I've clawed my way through life with nothing while you've had everything handed to you on a silver platter. So yes, I'm coming. And when I'm done, there won't be enough left of your precious estate or your reputation for you to rebuild. Consider this a courtesy warning. I could have simply arrived unannounced." Your devoted friend, Julian. Eliza's hands shook as she lowered the letter. "He's threatening violence. He's desperate, cornered." Adrian's jaw clenched. Desperate men do desperate things. "We need to alert the authorities." "There's no time. He's already on the road if he sent this hours ago." Adrian turned to Mrs. Davison. "Get everyone inside. The staff, any workers still on the grounds. Lock the doors, secure the windows. Now." The housekeeper moved immediately, her voice rising in sharp commands that sent servants scurrying. Eliza grabbed Adrian's arm. "What are you planning?" "To defend what's ours, our home, our people." His eyes were hard as flint. "Julian wants a fight? He'll get one. Adrian, you can't just watch me." He strode toward his study, Eliza hurrying after him. Inside, Adrian unlocked a cabinet she'd never seen opened, revealing an array of weapons. Hunting rifles, pistols, even an old cavalry saber. He began checking the firearms with practiced efficiency. "Your father's collection?" Eliza asked quietly. "Mine, actually. I learned to shoot at university. Haven't touched them in years, but..." He loaded a rifle with steady hands. "Some skills you don't forget. There has to be another way. If you shoot Julian, even in self-defense, then I shoot him." Adrian looked at her directly. "Eliza, he's coming here with the intent to destroy everything we've built. Everything you've built. I won't let that happen. So you'll risk prison, or worse?" "I'll risk whatever I have to risk to keep you safe." The words hung between them, heavy with the weight of everything they'd been through. 9 months of distance, followed by days of desperate partnership. A marriage built on transaction that had somehow transformed into something worth fighting for. "Then we do it together," Eliza said firmly, reaching for one of the smaller pistols. "I know how to shoot too. My father insisted I learn." Adrian stared at her. "Absolutely not." "Absolutely yes. You don't get to play the noble protector while I cower upstairs. That's not who we are anymore." "Eliza." "Adrian." She checked the pistol's chamber with competent hands. "Either we're partners, or we're not. Either you trust me to fight beside you, or you're still that man who locked doors because he was too afraid to let me make my own choices. Which is it?" He looked at her for a long moment. This woman who'd transformed his estate, saved a dying child, rallied an entire community, and was now standing before him armed and determined to defend their home. "Partners," he said finally, his voice rough. "Always." "Good. Now what's the plan?" Before Adrian could answer, the sound of approaching horses shattered the evening quiet. Multiple riders, moving fast, they rushed to the window. In the fading light, Eliza counted at least 8 men on horseback, Julian at their head. They looked rough, hired muscle, not gentlemen's companions. "More than I expected," Adrian muttered. "The staff are all inside?" Eliza asked. "According to Mrs. Davison, yes. Everyone's in the servants' quarters with the doors barred from inside." "Then it's just us." "Just us." They moved to the entrance hall as pounding began on the front doors. Julian's voice carried through the heavy wood. "Blackmore, I know you're in there. Open up or we break it down." Adrian positioned himself in front of the door, rifle ready. Eliza took position to the side, her smaller pistol gripped tight. "This is private property, Caraway," Adrian called. "Leave now and I won't press charges for trespassing and threatening behavior." Julian's laugh was ugly. "Press charges? You? You're about to have much bigger problems than trespassing. I'm warning you, and I'm warning you." The pounding intensified. "You've ruined me, Blackmore. Catherine turned on me, my creditors are circling, and the crown wants my head on a spike, all because you and your sanctimonious wife decided to play hero." "You ruined yourself," Eliza shouted before Adrian could respond. "We just refused to let you drag us down with you." "Brave words from behind a locked door, Your Grace, but then you're familiar with locked doors, aren't you? Your husband's specialty." The jab hit home, a reminder of Adrian's desperate mistake that first night. But instead of shame, Eliza felt fury rise hot and righteous. "At least my husband learned from his mistakes," she called back. "What's your excuse for being a lying, manipulative coward who has to hire thugs because he can't fight his own battles?" The pounding stopped. In the sudden silence, Julian's voice came through low and venomous. "Break it down." The assault began in earnest, shoulders slamming against wood, tools battering at the lock. The old doors were solid, built to withstand northern winters, but they wouldn't hold forever. "Upstairs," Adrian said urgently. "We'll defend from the gallery. Better position." They retreated up the grand staircase just as the front doors splintered. Julian and his men poured into the entrance hall like a flood of malice and desperation. From the gallery above, Adrian aimed his rifle. "That's far enough, Julian." The men froze, looking up to where Adrian stood silhouetted against lamplight, weapon trained on their leader. Julian raised his hands in mock surrender, that familiar, charming smile twisted into something cruel. "Going to shoot me, Blackmore, in front of witnesses? That'll look wonderful at your trial." "These aren't witnesses. They're accomplices to breaking and entering." Adrian's voice was steady. "And I have every right to defend my home and my wife." "Your wife?" Julian's eyes found Eliza standing beside Adrian, pistol raised. "There she is, the virtuous Duchess. Tell me, Your Grace, does he still lock you in your room, or have you graduated to being his armed guard?" "I'm here by choice," Eliza said clearly. "Something you apparently can't comprehend." "Choice." "Right." Julian began to circle slowly, his men fanning out around the hall. "You chose to marry a man who treated you like a prisoner. You chose to stay in this frozen wasteland. You chose to humiliate yourself trying to save a marriage that was dead from the start. You know nothing about our marriage." "I know he brought you here and ignored you for months. I know you were so desperate for attention you practically glowed when I showed you basic kindness. I know—" "You know how to manipulate lonely people," Adrian cut in. "How to identify vulnerability and exploit it. That's your only real skill, Julian, preying on the wounded." Julian's mask of charm cracked. "At least I had to work for everything I have. You were born into wealth and power and you wasted it all hiding in your fortress, too damaged by Daddy's cruelty to function like a normal human being." The words struck deeper than any weapon could. Eliza felt Adrian tense beside her, old wounds tearing open. But when he spoke, his voice was rock steady. "You're right. I was damaged. I hid behind walls and distance because I was too afraid to risk being hurt again. But the difference between us, Julian, is that I found someone who saw through the damage to the man underneath. Someone brave enough to fight for both of us when I was too broken to fight for myself." Adrian glanced at Eliza, and the love in his eyes was unmistakable. "You tried to destroy that, and you failed." "I haven't failed yet." Julian's hand moved to his coat. "Don't," Adrian warned, rifle trained on him. But Julian was past reason. He pulled out his own pistol with desperate speed, aiming not at Adrian but at Eliza. Everything happened at once. Adrian lunged to push Eliza behind him. Julian fired. The shot went wild, embedding in the gallery wall as Adrian's momentum sent them both stumbling. Return fire erupted from below, not from Julian's hired men, but from the direction of the servants' quarters. Mrs. Davison emerged from a side passage, leading a group of estate workers armed with hunting rifles and farm implements. "Not in my house, you don't," the housekeeper shouted, her rifle aimed at the nearest thug. The hired men froze, suddenly realizing they were outnumbered. Mrs. Davison's group had the advantage of position and the ferocity of people defending their home. "Stand down," one of Julian's men said, dropping his weapon. "This isn't worth dying for." "Cowards!" Julian spun on them. "I'm paying you." "With what money?" another man demanded. "We've heard the rumors." "You're broke, Caraway. This was supposed to be a quick intimidation job, not a war." "I'll get money. Once I take the estate." "You're not taking anything," a new voice rang out. Everyone turned to see Lord Pemberton striding through the shattered front doors, flanked by Crown Guards. Behind him came more guards, more investigators, and, to Eliza's shock, her father. "Papa?" she breathed. Her father's face was ashen as he took in the scene. His daughter standing in a gallery with a pistol, the shattered doors, the armed standoff. "Lord Caraway," Pemberton said coldly, "you're under arrest for assault, destruction of property, conspiracy to commit fraud, and now attempted murder. Gentlemen?" He gestured to the guards. Julian's face went white, then red with rage. "No, this isn't how this ends. You deserve a cell," Pemberton cut him off. "And a trial. Take him." As the guards moved in, Julian's composure shattered completely. "I should have had everything. The title, the estate, the respect. I'm smarter than him, better than him. I earned it." "You earned nothing," Adrian said quietly from the gallery. "You destroyed people and called it strategy. You manipulated trust and called it cleverness. And now you'll pay for it." Julian lunged suddenly, breaking free from the guards with desperate strength. He raised his pistol again, this time aiming directly at Adrian, but Eliza was faster. Her shot rang out clean and true, hitting Julian's shoulder. He spun with the impact, his own weapon firing harmlessly into the ceiling as he collapsed. The guards were on him immediately, binding his hands as he screamed curses and threats that devolved into incoherent rage. Eliza lowered her pistol with shaking hands. Adrian pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like shelter from a storm. "You saved my life," he murmured against her hair. "Partners," she replied, her voice unsteady. "Remember?" Lord Pemberton climbed the stairs to the gallery, his expression a mixture of respect and exasperation. "Your Graces, I don't suppose you could have waited for official assistance before engaging in armed combat." "We didn't exactly have time to send an invitation," Adrian replied dryly. "Clearly." Pemberton looked at the damage. Shattered doors, bullet holes in walls, an entrance hall full of armed combatants. "This will make for quite a report." "Lord Pemberton," Eliza said, finding her voice. "How did you know to come?" "Mrs. Davison sent word the moment that letter arrived. We rode as fast as we could." He glanced at the housekeeper, who was still holding her rifle with stern determination. "Resourceful woman, your Mrs. Davison." "The best," Adrian agreed. Eliza's father finally approached, climbing the stairs slowly. When he reached them, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Eliza, my dear child." "Papa." She went to him, letting him embrace her. "I'm all right. When I received Pemberton's message, when I learned what Caraway had done, what he'd made me believe about your marriage," her father's voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you, should have known you wouldn't stay in a truly cruel situation." "It's all right, Papa." "It's not. I believed his lies. I was ready to demand you come home." He pulled back to look at her. "Can you forgive a foolish old man?" "There's nothing to forgive." Julian was very convincing. Her father turned to Adrian, his expression grave. "Your Grace, I owe you an apology as well. I trusted Caraway's word over yours without question. I failed both of you." Adrian inclined his head. "You were protecting your daughter. I can hardly fault you for that. Still, I should have investigated before condemning." Her father glanced between them, taking in their linked hands, the way they stood together. "It seems the rumors of your marriage's troubles were not entirely fabricated, but the truth is far more complicated than Caraway painted it." "Much more complicated," Eliza agreed, "and much more hopeful." The cleanup took hours. The Crown Guards removed Julian and his hired men. Carpenters were summoned to begin repairs on the shattered doors. Statements were taken from everyone present. Through it all, Adrian and Eliza remained together, giving testimony side by side, directing repairs, reassuring staff. The partnership that had begun in desperation had become something seamless and natural. Finally, near midnight, Lord Pemberton prepared to depart. Lord Carroway will stand trial in London, he told them. With the evidence we have, including tonight's attack, he'll likely spend significant time in prison. Catherine has already agreed to testify against him in exchange for leniency. And our names, Adrian asked, will be cleared completely. I'll make sure the full story reaches the right ears in London. By the time you attend the trial, society will know the truth, that you were the victims of an elaborate conspiracy, not the perpetrators of embezzlement. Thank you, Eliza said quietly. Thank yourselves. You fought when most would have surrendered. You trusted in truth when lies would have been easier. Pemberton smiled slightly. And you've made my investigation significantly more interesting than usual. After he left, Eliza's father approached them once more. I should return to London, he said. But Eliza, I hope you'll visit soon. Bring your husband. Let me make amends properly. We will, Papa. And your Grace? He turned to Adrian. Take care of my daughter. I can see you love her. Don't let fear make you forget that. Never again, Adrian promised. When everyone had finally departed and the servants had been dismissed to rest, Adrian and Eliza found themselves alone in the damaged entrance hall. Broken glass crunched under their feet. The smell of gunpowder still hung in the air. Well, Eliza said, looking around at the destruction, this will be an interesting story for the grandchildren. Adrian laughed, a real, genuine sound that echoed in the cavernous space. Assuming we survive long enough to have grandchildren. We survived tonight. We can survive anything. He pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. I still can't believe you shot him. I still can't believe you pushed me out of the way of a bullet. Of course I did. You're everything, Eliza. My home, my heart, my future. I'd take 100 bullets before I'd let one touch you. She pulled back to look at him. That's possibly the most romantic and also most concerning thing you've ever said to me. I contain multitudes. He smiled, and it transformed his face from cold marble to warm humanity. But I mean it. These past few days fighting beside you, watching you rally people to our defense, seeing you stand in that gallery with a pistol defending our home. I've never been more in love with anyone in my life. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. Eliza reached up to touch his face. We're stuck with each other, Your Grace, for better or worse. In fortress estates and legal battles and apparently armed confrontations. Till death do us part? Till death do us part. He kissed her then, there in the ruined entrance hall of Blackmore Keep, surrounded by evidence of the battle they'd survived together. It was a kiss that tasted like gunpowder and triumph, like fear overcome and love hard won. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling. Come on, Adrian said, taking her hand. Let's see if my room is more comfortable than that chair in yours. Your room? I thought we were past separate wings. We are. I meant our room. Whichever one you prefer. Yours has the better view. And the bigger bed. Our room it is, then. They climbed the stairs together, leaving the wreckage behind. Tomorrow they'd deal with repairs and official statements and the long process of rebuilding their reputation in London. But tonight, they would simply be together. Two people who'd found each other through frozen silence and locked doors and desperate confessions. Two people who'd learned that love wasn't about perfect starts or flawless execution. It was about showing up, fighting through fear, and choosing each other again and again until the choice became as natural as breathing. 5 years later, Blackmore Keep was transformed beyond recognition. The once barren hills now bloomed with cultivated gardens that stretched toward the horizon. The tenant cottages were sturdy and well-maintained, smoke rising cheerfully from their chimneys. The estate thrived under careful management that balanced profit with genuine care for the people who worked the land. And the keep itself, once a fortress of isolation, had become something entirely different. Laughter echoed through halls that had been silent for generations. Children's voices rang out in rooms that had forgotten the sound. Warmth radiated from every corner, banishing the cold that had defined the place for so long. Eliza stood in the restored gardens, watching 3-year-old Eleanor chase butterflies through the rose beds her mother had planted during those lonely first months. The girl had Adrian's dark hair and Eliza's determination, a combination that promised interesting years ahead. "Careful with those roses, Ellie," Eliza called. "They have thorns." "I know, Mama. I'm being careful." The child's voice was bright with joy, arms wrapped around Eliza from behind. She leaned back into Adrian's embrace, contentment settling over her like sunshine. "She's going to climb that trellis," Adrian murmured against her ear, just like her mother did when I told her it was structurally unsound. I proved it was perfectly sound. "You proved you have no sense of self-preservation," says the man who charged at an armed intruder. "Touché." Adrian rested his chin on her shoulder. "How are you feeling? Tired?" Eliza pressed his hand against the swell of her belly, where their second child grew. "A bit, but happy tired." "The good kind?" "The best kind." They stood together in companionable silence, watching Eleanor play, feeling the baby move beneath their joined hands. Life had given them this: peace, hard won, joy fought for, love that had survived every test thrown at it. "Do you ever think about that night?" Adrian asked quietly. "The locked door?" "Sometimes." Eliza turned in his arms to face him. "Do you?" "Every day. Not with regret exactly. More like disbelief that I was that desperate, that afraid of losing you. You were locked in your own prison. You just finally found the courage to break free. We both did." Adrian tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You know what Mrs. Davison said to me last week?" "What?" "That Blackmore Keep finally feels the way it was always meant to feel. Alive. Full of love instead of ghosts." She's right. Eliza looked up at the fortress that had once seemed so cold and forbidding. Now it was simply home, scarred by battle but stronger for it, transformed by the same love that had transformed its masters. Eleanor ran up to them, breathless and beaming. "Papa, Mama, come see! I found a caterpillar!" Adrian scooped her up, settling her on his hip with practiced ease. "A caterpillar? What kind?" "A fuzzy one. Come see." They followed their daughter deeper into the gardens, their laughter mingling with hers. And watching from the kitchen window, Mrs. Davison smiled with satisfaction. She'd served this family for 25 years now. She'd watched tragedy and coldness nearly destroy it. She'd watched a brave woman arrive and refuse to accept defeat. She'd watched two broken people learn to fight for each other instead of against themselves. And now she watched them thrive, not despite the struggles they'd endured, but because of them. Because sometimes the strongest foundations are built not on perfect beginnings, but on the courage to start over, to tear down walls, to unlock doors, to choose love, even when fear screams louder, especially then. That night, after Eleanor was tucked into bed and the keep had settled into peaceful quiet, Adrian and Eliza stood at their bedroom window looking out over the estate they'd saved together. "Do you ever miss London?" Adrian asked, his arm around her waist. "Sometimes. The theaters, the bookshops, the energy." Eliza leaned into him. "But not enough to leave. This is home now. Even with its history, the coldness, the locked doors, all of it. Especially with its history. Every scar on these walls tells a story. Every repair we've made, every garden we've planted, every laugh we've shared, it's all part of what makes this place ours." Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then, "I have something for you." He crossed to his desk and pulled out a small box. Inside was a key, old brass, ornate, clearly antique. "What's this?" Eliza asked, confused. "The key to your chamber door, the one I locked that night." Adrian placed it in her palm. "I kept it as a reminder of my worst moment, of the thing I'm most ashamed of." Adrian, but also as a reminder of what it led to, the conversation we finally had, the truth we finally shared, the partnership we built from the ashes of that terrible decision. He closed her fingers around the key. "I want you to keep it, not as a symbol of my failure, but as proof that even our darkest moments can become the foundation for something better." Eliza looked down at the key, tears blurring her vision. "You're going to make me cry." "Good tears?" "The best kind." She set the key carefully on her vanity, then turned to pull him close. "Thank you for this, for everything, for becoming the man you were always meant to be. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to try." They stood together in the lamplight, two people who'd survived frozen silences and desperate gambles and armed confrontations. Two people who'd learned that marriage wasn't about perfect harmony. It was about fighting through discord until you found your rhythm. "I love you," Adrian said softly, "more than I thought possible, more than I have words for." "I love you too, even though you're still emotionally constipated sometimes." "Hey, it's true. Just last week you brooded for 2 days instead of telling me you were worried about the South Field flooding. I was processing. You were being ridiculous, but I love you anyway." Adrian laughed and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of the comfort that came from being truly known and loved despite every flaw and failing. Later, as they lay together in the darkness, Eliza's head on Adrian's chest and his arms wrapped securely around her, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. A marriage that started frozen and nearly ended in abandonment, a fortress that became a home, a man who learned to unlock doors instead of hiding behind them, a woman who refused to accept anything less than real love, real partnership, real life. And together they'd built something that would outlast them both. Not just an estate or a legacy, but proof that even the most broken beginnings could be transformed into triumphant endings. All it took was courage, and the willingness to keep choosing each other day after difficult day until the choosing became as natural as breathing. "Adrian?" Eliza murmured, half asleep. "No more locked doors?" His arms tightened around her. "Never again, I promise." "Good." And in the morning, when Eleanor burst into their room demanding breakfast and stories, when the estate work called and responsibilities beckoned, when life resumed its beautiful, chaotic, imperfect rhythm, they faced it all together. Not as Duke and Duchess maintaining appearances, but as partners, lovers, friends, as Adrian and Eliza Blackmore, who turned a frozen fortress into a home filled with laughter and love and the kind of happiness that's only possible after surviving storms that should have destroyed everything. They'd survived. They'd thrived. And they'd proven that sometimes the best love stories are the ones that start with locked doors and desperate confessions and two stubborn hearts finally learning to beat in sync, the ones where the fortress doesn't fall. It transforms into something stronger, warmer, infinitely more beautiful than either person could have built alone.